they can't be hypnotized or properly conditioned for.
So the big question a lot of people wonder is how do we go and get $1,000 client or just four-figure clients in general? But I know when a hypnotist is starting out, that $1,000 seems like a lot of money. I know that when I first did my show, I think I was 22 and I did my first ever $1,000 show. I felt so anxious I threw up the next morning, which is something not a lot of people know. But it's a lot of money if you're not used to it. So a lot of people ask, how do you land that first $1,000 client? And I thought you'd be perfect for this because we just did this about a year or two ago. And when we started with you, we did a ton of one-on-one training, but then that was to better translate for your first day of mentoring, one-on-one and small group practice to actually get you comfortable with getting out and doing exactly what we had done with you. Did you feel that properly translated to, for example, one-on-one cold approach street hypnosis?
Yes.
I think this is why mentors are great, because even if you have a lot of book smart knowledge, can you confirm or deny that it's drastically different from actually having applicable how-to in the moment in-field experience?
Yes, it's way different than the book smarts because once you get into the real world, no matter how much you know from books, it won't mean anything if the subject is different than what the books say. They should be able to follow this strict, set way. It's like, yes, and it'll automatically get them into the state. It's like you would have to go about, listen, switch it up to get it to work. If not, it won't work with that particular person.
And once you get comfortable with that, I would say, and this is something that I preach to all HypnoKick students, which is don't feel unprofessional if you're starting out and you're trying to figure out how do you get the first $1,000 client, because everyone has to start somewhere. When I first started, I did shows for $300. I literally did house parties as well as festivals for $300, and those are two completely different venues, and honestly should be charged two completely separate, prices for the venue and audience type. But there's nothing wrong when you're first starting out for doing something, for example, for $400 or less. And a lot of people, I think, because they have that minimum wage mentality, $400 for an hour, like that's insane. Like, most people get paid however much they get paid in their state's minimum wage or factory wage to do their job or factory job or what have you. So the idea that $400 for an hour could be accomplished, I know is crazy for many, but I think it's best to do everything from the very beginning for a few $100s and do as many lower paying shows, $300-400 as possible, because what we want to do is record that content and upload it either to a promo video and or to a platform like YouTube, because at the end of the day, what we all know as professional hypnotists is that all of our future clients, the only thing that they really want is a proof of concept. And a lot of clients do want one-on-one or strolling hypnosis. We get several of those requests a year. Even small house party clients would be okay settling many times for one-on-one strolling versus a big stage show, especially because the average person isn't aware of how much a fully insured and seasoned hypnotist cost. So a lot of them aren't wanting to spend, $1,000, which is fine because we're still working our way up to that, right?
Yes.
Once we get more comfortable and we hone our craft and we get a lot more in-field experience, the more comfortable we become, I think then we can safely begin to charge more. But to price our services as a value and not based on ego, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does make sense.
How would you define that? If like a student was wondering right now, what does it mean to price based on value, not ego? What would you say?
Basically, they're not paying for they're paying for the experience for their guest, for their venue.
Exactly. I think that's what sometimes a lot of hypnotists, I even know stage hypnotists who charge a lot of money based on ego, but their show isn't, any much more outstanding or astounding than, the average hypnotist doing your belly button's missing, or you're going to talk to a celebrity through your shoe or something like that. But it's more ego than value based. And conversely, I've also seen great hypnotists charge so little because, ironically, they have maybe imposter syndrome or issues with their own ego, like I'm not good enough, or who would pay me, or who would, we've all experienced that. Who would pay me X amount of dollars, right? Did you ever have that starting out?
A little bit, yes.
And that's normal. But I think, again, start out with a lower number, do a bunch of shows. The more comfortable we get, the higher we can charge, assuming that we're matching that with the market value, which is based on market research and what we know, what we were trained to do. And then I think once we get used to that and we start charging more, then it can be safe to start going for clients such as high school proms. Because like the average high school prom client is going to pay between a starting average of $1,000 to $1,500. For example, your first prom show was $1,200, correct?
Yeah, it's $1,200.
And that was booked based on what?
The experience and not me.
But what I'm getting at is, based on what we talked about in the beginning of the lesson, what did they look at to decide that they were going to hire you?
Oh, they looked at my promo.
Looking back at it now in retrospect, because not a lot of people know, and I know that we've had talks about this and you weren't sure how to obviously feel about the experience. There's a lot that ended up going wrong between the very beginning and the very end. I think this is the real stuff and meat and potatoes that beginners that want to go pro but might not be sure if it's for them or what to expect. I think this is the real bulk of the lesson that those people and those potential students are going to benefit from, because there were multiple things that happened. So from your perspective, give us some critiques on what went wrong, why you think it might have gone wrong, and what could have been done better, whether it was on your end or the client's end.
Okay, to get it started, it was the main thing, which was time, because they did not give me adequate time to be able to set up. Because when I arrived and went into the empty room after eventually meeting the person who was supposed to meet me up in the front, she eventually took me to a room, then just left me alone in the room. She went elsewhere, who knows, to do whatever. And I was just in the room like, oh, where's the stage? Where's the chairs? Where's the PA system?
So nothing was set up already.
Yeah, there was just a stage backed very far away from where the bleachers were set up in the very back.
So already off to a not great start.
No, definitely not. So yeah, the PA system, music were also missing because the professional sound guy I was promised was there, but he was currently packing up to leave out the door.
The guy who's going to give you a microphone and or just a music connection, what was that?
Yeah, he was supposed to set up my music. They were gonna plug in my phone and so I could be able to play music during the show to help enhance the experience, but nope.
He literally just up and left before you started.
Yeah, he was there for the pre-dance party they were having.
How did that affect things, do you think? And also, what did that end up leading into next?
Well, during the induction, a parent turned on the light. There was also the same parent approached me asking me if they want the lights off while I was directing the students where to go on the stage, or stage-ish spot. The littlest stage. Yeah, so yeah, they turned it on during the induction, so I had to try to corral and get everybody back to listening to me again, and continue with the induction with the lights on instead of off.
I saw that immediately disrupted things. So did you notice that, and or how did it also simultaneously kind of make you feel mentally as you were trying to proceed with your regular routine?
frustrated a little bit. It was like, oh shoot, what am I gonna do now? Now I have to read it again or try to get everybody back into the mind space to get hypnotized again.
And then that goes hand in hand with obviously all the disruptions and the you know, the more or less the calm chaos it created, which was, again, this was one of the biggest things we talked about when we looked at your footage post show, is that there was several things after the lights came on that made it very clear a lot of people were coming out of it. So what were the things in retrospect that you noticed now that you wish you would have noticed then, that people who are trying to get into stage should be considerate of? Obviously, so far we have time was not contracted, in terms of they did not stick to the contracted time, giving you a certain amount, a lot of time to prepare. Their music guy literally walked out the door and left you high and dry, so you didn't have the proper music to complement the process you're trying to execute. They turn on the lights and bring people out of hypnosis, and now you're frazzled and you're trying to push forward like a professional and do the best you can. What is it now in retrospect that we noticed that we probably take a closer look at and maybe take better care of, that is real life examples that maybe other people who start their stage career after watching this at some point can spot themselves and maybe keep this lesson in mind to better prep themselves on what to look out for to ensure a smoother process for themselves if they experience something similar?
Reading people. There was the person with the glow sticks, a long train of glow sticks, and they were messing with it with their friend who was distracting them. And there was the gray shirt guy who was not really in it the whole entire time. Then we also have the one who was faking it, who ended up staying pretty much until the end of the one I missed. I started to catch on to it, but did not send him back because it was it seemed over the top how he reacted to things, like, but I didn't click to say, oh, I need to send back.
And I did see at one point that you saw some female, I think she was laying down, you looked at her, she might have been sitting down, but it's been a while since I looked at the footage, but you saw
she was sitting down, and I noticed she wasn't responding well to me. I tapped her on the shoulder to tell her to leave the stage.
And I think that's something that a lot of people when they start out are afraid to do, which is literally take on the role of the authority that they're paid to be. You know, as hypnotists, we are mental guides to help these people in a staged comedy setting to enter a certain frame of mind, to have a awesome, you know, mental vacation and psychological experience with comedy stage hypnosis. But at the same time, we also have to be able to read people. And if we can see certain people either just are joking or heckling or not taking it seriously or aren't in the right frame of mind, we have to have the confidence in ourselves to know that we can be the authority that can stand up and say, hey, this isn't working for you, you got to go back. And understand that, especially with certain personalities, let alone venues like high school and colleges, we're going to encounter those personalities that try to combat us. And I've had plenty of those. For me, it's usually guys, but in your case, it was a girl. They're like, no, I don't think I will go back. And you have to just emotionally take on that role as the authority. Like, and I think you took your microphone away and you're like, no, seriously, you can go back, which is something that I think a lot of people are afraid to do, but it's necessary. And I think you did the right thing there. What would you have done differently, whether it was with her, even though I think you did that properly, or with anyone else, if you were to do all this again?
To definitely spot out the people who are obviously not going to listen to me and they're just there to show off to their friends in the audience, like, ha, this is not real. You're not going to get me.
Because a big thing is also, which is interesting, because earlier we talked about avoiding doing something based on ego. And the interesting thing is, when we're first starting out, unless we take that authoritative position in combination with reading people, reading situation. And I know you struggled with this, and I struggled with it for certain shows I've done in the past. It's a huge hit to our ego. And we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to see it. We don't want to have to deal with it for quite a while because it's an ego hit to us. But at the same time, it's also a sign to us. And this is all to future aspiring stage hypnotists out there too, that this lesson is being made for you to understand all these intricacies that someone else has already experienced themselves, and what to potentially look out for, and the kind of personalities to potentially expect depending on the type of client or venue or event you book, and to not be afraid to stand up for yourself, not be afraid to be the authority. So for anyone watching this right now, hearing your story, listening to all the things that you just pointed out and critiqued about your own show, what additional last minute pro tips would you have for aspiring hypnotists watching this?
Well, during my stage show, as I was weeding out people, I also should have moved them closer together because they were on opposite sides, which made me have to walk so much more unnecessarily. I should have condensed them together, and I forgot to do that.
It happens. I still have to think about that sometimes because we get into, there's a zone. Is there not a zone? There's a zone.
I was in a zone, so I forgot about that. It's like I looked at it momentarily because the ADD part of me was like, OCD part, like, it's like, I don't like that. It was like, but then, yeah, I just didn't do it.
I know there was a show where I was doing something in someone's basement for an 18th birthday party, and there was just a ton of people, but very, very few of them were getting hypnotized. And eventually through the show, I weeded some of them out, but then you squeeze them together. And it's something that you just learned and experience with, again, that was your first ever stage show.
Yeah.
It's something that you just learned to do. And I think it's because I had a talk with a UK-based hypnotist that said, whatever you do, never have empty chairs. Even if you have empty chairs, it's fine, but make sure that you squeeze, basically what we're talking about here, squeeze them together and then remove the empty chairs, because one of the biggest things people are going to notice, whether they're looking at a promo reel or YouTube clip, they're going to be attracted visually to the empty chairs, because in their minds, like, oh, they couldn't keep all the volunteers, even though it's an interesting thing to say, because very few hypnotists for all their shows ever keep 100% of the volunteers. I mean, the classic way to do stage hypnosis is bring a bunch of people that are interested up, do suggestibility test, weed everyone and kick everyone off stage that doesn't, comply very well with the suggestibility test. So whether you're doing the old way or the new age way, you're likely to have empty chairs here and there. And then you just want to squeeze people together and then remove the empty chairs. So that way, whether you're doing a YouTube video or a promo reel, it looks, even if you only have a few people up on stage, like you have a full stage. Any other pro tips or things, critiques from your own past to help other students, or to maybe just a pro tip outside of what you've experienced that you think might help people looking to start their own journey as professional hypnotists, let alone stage hypnotists?
Always arrive there at least an hour or so before time, so you catch things that your client misses and forgets to do, and you have to rush and make sure it's there before you start your show. Just in case.
I concur. Yes. There was a show that we did in Iowa years ago before COVID where, had we not showed up an hour early, we would not have had a working PA system. And it was our PA system, but we were not aware until we start testing things 50 to 45 minutes before we went live that our PA system was crashing. The batteries weren't working. We couldn't use their PA system for some reason because it was a really old system, and our system needed new batteries or something was technologically wrong with it. And we literally didn't get the music and the mic fixed until minutes before the show. It took us that long for that hour. However, had we not arrived early, never would have gotten it fixed, and it would have been an hour of yelling. Yelling induction, yelling the deepener, yelling routines. And I've done it. I've had to do it before. I just did a show like that. I think one of our first shows in 2023, I just had to yell because they're like, oh yeah, bring your PA and everything into this restaurant. There was nowhere to set that up. There was like no space to do anything. So that's another reason you want to arrive early. Look at the space. And it's funny how many clients think, oh no, you don't need to look at the space, just come and do your thing. But this was an example of, we went to the restaurant, there was no space for a PA. People are drunk in this case because it's a corporate show, and there's just, I don't know where outlets are to plug stuff in. And so it's good that we came an hour early, because I realized I had to improv and I would have to yell things, and I managed the best I could with a bunch of drunk people. But yes, arrive early, view the space, review what's going on, talk with the organizer, and hopefully things are as they agreed to on your contract.